Welcome to the home of geographic and civic solutions. It's your
Good day
teacher,
to you.
Mr. Legacy.
Welcome to the home of geographic and civic solutions. In our previous video, we were looking at civic education, GCE past paper 2024, section A. So today, without wasting much of the time, I would like us to go to section B and attempt to answer questions in this section. So let's go to question 1. As per tradition, section B has 5 questions that are compulsory, and you must answer all the questions in the answer booklet provided. So question 1. In 2011, the then Zambian Republican president appointed a committee to draft the Zambian constitution. What was the name of the technical committee that was appointed to draft the constitution? So for question 1, the best possible answer there is the technical committee. The technical committee on drafting the Zambian constitution. That is the best possible answer for A. Let's get to B. So B says, who was the chairperson of the committee? Who was the chairperson of the committee? So the chairperson of the committee was Anel Silungwe. Let's get to C. Give 3 recommendations of the technical committee mentioned in A. Give 3 recommendations of the technical committee mentioned in A. So the technical committee actually gave quite a number of recommendations, among which is dual citizenship. And the other recommendation that was made by the committee was introduction of a ruling part, a running mate, introduction of a running mate. Then the other recommendation that was made was for single member majoritarian system, majoritarian system, which is also known as 50+1, for electing presidential candidates. So as you know, when electing presidential candidates in Zambia, we now use the single member majoritarian system, which is 50%+1 only for presidential candidates. Then for these other positions, like mayoral position, parliamentarian position, local government position, all these positions, you actually elect the leaders through first past the post or winner takes it all system. Then perhaps the other recommendation that we can add here is the creation of constitutional court. So those are some of the recommendations that were made by the technical committee led by Anel Silungwe. Let's get to D. Now, D says, state 2 reports the committee referred to in drafting the constitution. state to reports the committee referred to in drafting the constitution. So there are quite a number of reports that the committee referred to when drafting the constitution, and one of them is the Mwanakatwe Constitutional Review Commission. The Mwanakatwe Constitutional Review Commission. Then the other report that we can talk about that was referred to was the Mungomba Constitutional Review Commission report. Of 2005. Of course, like we know, the Mwanakatwe Constitutional Review Commission report was 1993. Then the other, report that was referred to, other than the Mwanakatwe and the Mungomba CRC, was the National Constitution Conference report and drafting constitution. So that was the National Constitution drafting constitution. So the National Constitution Conference drafting constitution. So please, these are the 4 key reports that were referred to when drafting the annual Slungwe-led technical committee constitution of Zambia. Let's get to E. Mention one factor to consider. Mention one factor to consider when amending the constitution. That is 1 mark. So there are so many factors that you can consider when making the constitution. Mind you, before you come up with a constitution, it is very important that you look at the previous and current constitution, because it helps to identify the gaps as well as what we call lacunas in the constitution. So the first thing that you have to look at when drafting the constitution is looking at the previous and current constitution. After that, after looking at the previous and current constitution, you also look at the culture of people. You also look at social, dynamics, or you can just simply call them societal dynamics. Other than that, you can also, look at the public views of citizens, the public views of citizens. Other than that, it is important that you also look at the history of the country. So there are quite a number of factors that must be considered. Now question 2 says, what concept is used to refer to a person with severe and potentially fatal condition caused by physical dependence on alcohol? Now, this question is coming from the topic substance abuse. That's a grade 10 topic in civic education. So the best possible answer for A is alcoholism. 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 Let's get to B. Now B says, mention the name of the drug found in cannabis. Mention the name of the drug found in cannabis. So the best, to be precise, the specific drug that is found in cannabis is what we call THC, or tetrahydrocannabinol. Tetrahydrocannabinol. That is the drug that you find in, cannabis. Tetrahydrocannabinol. Let's get to C. Which form of cannabis has the highest content of the drug mentioned in B? In this case, the question is simply telling us to find the answer for the for the drug which you find in cannabis in the highest content. So the best possible answer here is hashish oil. Hashish oil. So which form of cannabis has the highest content of the drug mentioned in B? Remember, there are 3 forms of cannabis. The first form of cannabis is marijuana. The second form of cannabis is hashish. Then the third form of cannabis is hashish oil. Hashish oil. So let's get to D. Now this says, state the process used to refer to production of heroin. Now this one is quite simple. So this is what we call acetylation. This is what we call acetylation. Let's get to E. How does lysergic acid diethylamide, LSD, affect the user? Now there are quite a number of effects of LSD, and one of the effects of LSD is it causes the user to hallucinate. It causes the user to hallucinate. Then the other effect of LSD is that it makes the user to interpret messages wrongly. Then the other effect that LSD has on the user is that it causes disruption. It causes disruption in the interaction of nerve cells. So those are some of the effects. Let's get to F. What name is given to the disease caused by alcohol where the liver becomes fatty and enlarged, causing inflammations? So this is what we call liver cirrhosis. This is what we call liver cirrhosis. Let's get to G. Now G says, name the government institution charged with the responsibility of curbing substance abuse. So the institution that is charged with the responsibility of curbing substance abuse is the Drug Enforcement Commission. Drug Enforcement Commission, commonly known as DEC, commonly known as DEC. So away from question 2, I would like us to go to question 3. Now question 3 says, explain the following concepts used in media governance. Explain the following concepts used in media governance. Gender bias. Now, what is gender bias? By definition, when you say gender bias, this is a tendency. This is a tendency, the tendency to give preferential treatment of one gender over another. This is the tendency of giving, preferential treatment of one gender over another. So in this case, you are basically talking about treating one particular gender, in a more favorable way than another. Let's get to B, language bias. Now, when you say language bias, in this case, we are talking about, the media usually disseminating information in English, thereby denying those who do not understand English to access information. Very few programs, even on TV or radio, are presented in, local languages. And I'm sure you understand to say Zambia's literacy levels are not that high. So basically, when you say language bias, you are basically talking about, being able to give information or disseminate information in English, denying those who do not understand the language from accessing information. Let's get to C, private media. Now, when you say private media, remember, the media can either be private or public. And when we talk about private media, this is the type of media owned by individuals, or private companies, and institutions such as churches, For example, the Catholic Church have, a radio station in Kitwe, which is Radio Ichengelo. Let's get to D, public media. Now, public media is obviously, owned by the state. So it is owned and controlled by the state. That is public media. I would like us to go to question 4, without wasting much of the time. So question 4, quickly. Question 4 says, explain the concept environmental degradation. Now, this is a very interesting question. Explain the concept environmental degradation. Explain the concept environmental degradation. Now, when you say environmental degradation, to degrade, first of all, is to make the environment less fit for human, plants, and animal life. So you're basically, looking at any action that makes the environment less fit for human, animal, and plant life. Let's get to B. Now, B says, name 2 physical components of the environment. Name any 2 physical components of the environment. Name any 2 physical components of the environment. Now, in the environment, there are 4 key components, and these are the components that you must always be talking about. So we have what we call the natural environment. Then we also have what we call political environment. Then we have what we call economic environment. Then we have what we call social and cultural environment. Social and cultural environment. So you must be able to talk about these 4 key components of the environment. Now let's get to C. Now C says, mention 1 effect of water pollution on living organisms. Mention 1 effect of water pollution on living organisms. Now, one of the effects of water pollution is that it actually makes, living organisms to be affected negatively, and some of the living organisms can easily die as a result of water pollution. So one effect of water pollution on living organisms are basically, accidental discharges, especially from the mines and other industries. So accidental, discharge of untreated wastewater. Makes people vulnerable to infections like biohazia. So biohazia, to plants, they do, actually there is that promotion of excessive growth of plants in water, especially weeds in water, especially weeds. Now let's quickly look at D. State 2 effects of environmental degradation. State 2 effects of environmental degradation. So So some of the effects of environmental degradation that we can talk about is that, you know, it makes biodiversity to be lost. So loss of biodiversity. And when we say biodiversity, we are talking about the variety of living, plant and animal species. So that variety is actually destroyed as a result of, environmental degradation. The other effect is the ozone layer depletion. The ozone layer depletion. That's another effect. Other than the ozone layer depletion, you can also talk about, loss of tourism industry. Loss of tourism industry. Now, when you talk about loss of tourism industry, you're basically looking at, environmental degradation, destroying all our, tourist attractions, especially wildlife as well as, these, water bodies that attract different tourists from across the world. So once we lose our, wildlife, then tourists will have nothing to come and see here. So basically, environmental degradation destroys, the tourism industry in that sense. I would like us to conclude with E, which says, give one example of resource depletion. Very simple question. Give one example of resource depletion. You can talk about soil, you can talk about water itself, you can talk about you can talk about forests. You can talk about forests as a result of deforestation. Forests as a result of deforestation, meaning you can equally talk about desertification. So those are some of the examples of resource depletion, including overfishing, which we cannot forget. Overfishing, we cannot forget overfishing.
Question 5, which says, briefly describe the circumstances in which the Zambian, or rather briefly describe the circumstances in which the laws of Zambia do not allow adoption of children. Now, the law states that, children must always have an adult to look after them. A child is any person who is 18 years and below. Now, the court always puts the best interest of the child first, not just the interest or wishes of the parents or any adult when deciding custody of, the child. So the law does not allow adoption, based on certain circumstances, and one of those circumstances may include, adoption of a female infant by a male applicant on his own, unless there are special reasons for doing so. So a male applicant cannot adopt a female child by his own unless there are special reasons to that adoption. Other than that, the other condition that we can, talk about is adoption of an infant who already has parents, who already who already has parents or guardians, or anybody providing maintenance to the child, unless with these persons permission. So what that simply means is that adoption of an infant who already has parents or guardians or anybody providing maintenance to the child cannot be done unless with the person's permission. And when we say person's permission, we mean the permission of the guardian or the parents providing maintenance to this child. Other than that, the other condition or circumstance under which adoption cannot take place is, an application by one of a pair of a couple, unless with consent of both partners. So what this means is that a wife or a husband cannot apply to adopt an infant on his or her own without the agreement of the other party. So if a couple, wants to adopt a child, there is need for the couple to agree. And if it is only one party trying to adopt the child, the other party or the other partner must be able to, provide support in that way. So consent must be given by both partners if that is a couple. Now, the other circumstance under which adoption cannot take place is, in situations where, except in the case, of a couple who are spouses, adoption will not be made to more than one person to adopt the same infant. So if an infant has been adopted already by a couple or by an individual, that infant will not be, adopted again by another person or couple. That is basically, what that means. Then the other, condition is a condition where, the person intending to adopt an infant should not be less than 21 years. Should not be less than 21 years. Should not be less than 21 years older than the infant being adopted? If so, adoption cannot take place. Adoption cannot take place. So what that means is that if it is a couple intending to adopt an infant, one of the partners should be at least not less than 21 years older than the infant being adopted. So those are the conditions under which adoption cannot take place, or circumstances under which adoption cannot take place. Now, based on what we've discussed or how we've answered section B, I would like you to stay glued to the channel and be able to be saved with section C, that is essay questions. See you in our next lesson.